This video is showing your Unit 1B test review all worked out. Please know this is going to be a pretty long video because every question will be worked out. You may want to pause. I am going to go as quick as I can, so you might want to pause as you are writing down your notes and checking your answers. So number one, simplify the following expression. We need to make sure we're following order of operations, so we have to do everything inside of the grouping symbols. And within the grouping symbols, I have things I can do. I'm actually going to do three things at the same time. I can do the 4 to the second, I can do the 54 divided by 9, and I can do the square root of 36 all at the same time, and it won't mess me up because I should do the 54 divided by 9, and then in the next line I could do the 4 squared and the square root of 36. But just in the sake of time, I'm going to do it like this. So 4 squared is 16, and then 54 divided by 9, this is a positive or a plus 6, and then this is a negative 6 for the square root of 36. Now, one thing to keep in mind is to kind of, as we clean this up, is I can actually cancel things out. I could cancel out the plus 6 minus 6 because that would be 0. If I'm adding 6 to 16 and then taking it away, that's just canceling that out. So the only thing I have left on the inside there is 16. And remember, anything on the outside of a parentheses or a grouping symbol, that means we're multiplying. So 2 times 16 is 32. The next question, number 2, which operation should be performed second? Watch out, ladies and gentlemen. I do this all the time where I mess that up. I'm going to go ahead. It says which will be performed second to simplify the following expression. The first thing I would do is my exponents. 2 to the third power is going to give me 8. And then the rest of the problem is divided by 2 plus 6 times 4. So I've taken care of my grouping symbols because I didn't have any. I've taken care of exponents. My next thing is to multiply and divide. But remember, we go in order from left to right, whatever we see first. So if I'm going from left to right, I actually hit that first, that 8 divided by 2. So this was the first thing I did here was my exponent. The second thing, and that's what they want me to do, is the second thing, I'm doing division. So this is my second thing, D, divide. The next thing we have is to simplify the following expression. Literally, we're just going to simplify. Remember that anything we have to the 0 power equals 1. That gives me 1 minus 5, still inside parentheses, and then divided by 2. That gives me a negative 4 divided by 2. Remember, a negative divided by a positive gives me a negative, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So my answer there is negative 2. You might want to look at your integer rules again to remind you of things like that. We have to simplify the following expression. This time I have an absolute value going on. So this is my grouping symbol, absolute value. I'm doing 3 minus 5. My 3 minus 5 gives me a negative 2 inside of my absolute value bars. Well, the absolute value of anything is a positive number because it's just the distance from 0 on a number line. So my negative 2 becomes a positive 2, but the negative sign outside here I have to bring down here. And then I'm going to add 4 because I still have to add 4. Now we have a negative 2 plus 4. This is going to give me a positive 2 answer, or just 2. I could just write 2 in my answer box and that's fine. Think of battle boxes too when you're trying to do your combining integers. Again, we're simplifying the following expression. A lot of people are going to do this on their Desmos and they're going to get a decimal answer. You're not going to have a decimal because you can tell clearly that all of your answer choices here, these are all a fraction answer. But they do have a mixed number for this. So the first thing I'm going to do though is clean up the top. I can do this part right here and that's going to give me a negative 8 for that. And then I have 8 squared. I can do this part, which is 64. So what I have is 64 minus negative 8. To clean it up even further, that means 64 plus 8. Because the two negative signs, when we combine them, they become positive. All that's going to go over 5. And I'm still got to add a 28 to all this. So I have to still take care of the stuff with the division bar first. Now I have the 64 plus 8. That's going to give me 72. And I get 72 over 5 plus 28. Now, I could do two things here. I can make a common denominator, and I can put 28 over 1, and then I can work it out to be that this part would be 72 over 5 plus 140 over 5. Because if this was 28 over 1, to get it to be something over 5, I times by 5. And if I times the numerator by 5, I get 140 over 5. So I can do it this way, and then when I add, I wind up with 212 over 5. And this goes in, when you do the division, it goes in 42 whole times, but I have a remainder. Now that remainder, if you did it on the calculator, it becomes a 0.4 or 4/10. So a lot of people are going to put that answer right there thinking they're done. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, your fractions must always be in lowest terms. So I can divide both of these. This can be divided by 2. This can be divided by 2. That gives me this answer here. So it's 42 2/5 for my answer for that. The other thing I could have done is just gone ahead and done it on the calculator. But again, this one does kind of work out nicely as far as decimals go, but they won't always work out nicely for decimals. All right, so number 6, which expressions when simplified have a negative value? So we're looking for everything that's going to wind up being negative. Work it out and don't try to be lazy about it, because otherwise if you try to guess, it's going to wind up probably being wrong. We have 8 minus 10, again in absolute value. That's an absolute value of negative 2 minus the 4. That means 2 minus 4. Well, that does give me a negative 2, so this is one of the things I will circle. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're only circling the possible answers. Don't mark off other things. And now the next one here. We have 6 divided by 2. That gives me 3. And 3 to the second power gives me 9. So I have 9 plus 7 minus 1. Again, going left to right for order of operations. That's 16 minus 1. That gives me 15. Well, 15 is not a negative value, so I don't do anything with that one. This one in the middle, we have 1 minus 15. That's going to give me a negative 14. And I have 2 plus the negative 14. That's going to give me a negative 12 on the top. The bottom is 2 times 3, which is 6. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, and that's what I want right there. I don't really care about what it is. I know it's negative 2, but that doesn't matter. I just care that it's going to be a negative answer. This next one here, 6 to the 0 power minus 8, that means 1 minus 8. That means negative 7 divided by 2. Again, I don't care what the answer is. I know that a negative divided by a positive gives me a negative answer. That one is also getting circled. Here we have the absolute value of 2 plus 5, that's 7, and it is 7, so then I have a negative on the outside, which makes it a negative 7. Negative 7 plus another negative 7, or combining negative 7s is just more negative, that's negative 14. So this one also gets circled. So we have 4 of these 5 things that were all negative answers when we were done. Number 7 here. We have to circle all the expressions that when simplified equal 1. Again, work out every problem. The square root of 1 is 1 times 1, which does equal 1. This is one of the things I'm going to circle. Remember again, anything to the 0 power. I have 2 to the 0 power, that's 1. But when I times it by a negative 3, that's negative 3 times 1, I now have negative 3. So that one is not something I'm circling. 5 to the second power is 25. This is the absolute value of 25 minus 26. That means the absolute value of negative 1. Well, again, the absolute value of anything is positive, and so this does equal 1. I'm going to circle this one. Here, 3 to the 4th power equals 81. And 3 to the 3rd power equals 27. When I divide, I get 3. So this one will not be circled. So we only have those 2 things to circle for that. Number 8, simplify the following expression. Again, I can do a couple things at the same time, so I'm going to do that. I have 4 squared, which is 16. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. 8 minus 3, 16 minus 9, and still have my brace. But I'm also going to do this. I'm going to add 12. The square root of 144 is 12. Okay, I still have to work inside my bracket, and I'm still going to do the parentheses. So now we have 8 minus 3 times 7, and end my bracket, plus 12. And now I have to do this here. Keep in mind you have a negative 3. If you take care of the sign as you're doing the multiplication, you'll take care of the the sign as far as adding or subtracting. So now I have 8. This is a negative 3 times a positive 7. That's a negative 21. So now it becomes a minus 21. Then I still have to add the 12 when I get done with the math in here. This here becomes negative 13, and I'm still adding the 12. My final answer then is negative 1. And again, think of battle boxes if you need to. If you don't remember battle boxes, you got a positive, you got a negative. I have a 12 for my positive, I have 13 for the negatives. It's just like a scoreboard. Who won? The negatives won, and how much do they win by? By 1 point, so it would be a negative 1. Okay, number 9, it says now we're going to be substituting. So we have to work out all of these to do this. The first thing it's telling us is that the A is equal to 64. Well, if I look at each one of these, every one of them has the square root of A. So I'm going to go ahead and do that the square root of A is equal to the square root of 64, which is equal to 8. So all of these values there are all going to be 8 and then doing something to the 8. So it just kind of makes my life a little easier if I think of it that way first. So we have 8 minus 5, and B is negative 2. So 8 minus 5 times negative 2, I'm doing negative 5 times the negative 2. That means 8 plus 10. That's 18. Well, that's not a value of negative 2, which is what I'm going for. So this one's out. The next one, I have 8 plus 5 times negative 2. Well, again, positive 5 times a negative 2, that gives me a negative 10. 8 minus 10 is what I'm talking about. And 8 minus 10 is negative 2. So this one I do like. I need to keep going, though, just to make sure. So this one would be 8 plus a negative 2, which is like saying 8 minus 2, which is 6. So this one's definitely out still. And even though we know that B was the right answer. And then here we have 8 minus 2, and then again, B is a negative 2. That means a negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. That's 8 plus 4, and that's 12. And so again, that's out for that one. So just even though you got the right answer at B, make sure you are checking all the others that they check out as being wrong answers. Okay, on this one here, they do this a lot where they're giving you some random equation and you just have to plug and chug. Okay, so plug it in and solve. They're giving me the F right here, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. We do this a lot in science. So I'm just plugging that in right here for the F. So we have 86 minus 32, and that's going in parentheses. I need to times it by 5 over 9, and that's going to give me my degrees Celsius, which is what we want. So now we have 86 minus 32, which is 54, times the 5 over 9. Okay, well, in order to multiply, I need to have this a fraction, so I'm going to put it over 1. And the best advice I can give you is to simplify before you multiply. Now, you do have a calculator, so it wouldn't be too hard. You could do 54 times the 5, get an answer, and then divide it by 9, and then that's going to be your answer. But I can simplify because 9 and 54 have a common factor of 9. So 9 divided by 9 becomes 1, and 54 divided by 9 becomes 6. And now I can multiply straight across. 6 times 5 is 30, and then 1 times 1 is 1. We know anything over 1 is itself, so this was 30 degrees Celsius was our answer for that one. All right, number 11, we're again evaluating by plugging in the numbers and going from there. So I have 6 minus 4, and the C in this case is 1/2. All that is over 20 minus 2, and then the D was 8. Okay, now when you see a fraction, one of the first things you should think of is something easy with it. So in this case here, I'm saying half of, because multiplication of negative 4. So half, I can do it that way, half of 4. And all I'm going to do then, half of 4 is 2. So it's going to be 6 minus 2 on the top. The bottom, now I have negative 2 times a positive 8. It's going to give me a negative, so it's going to be 20 minus 16. Now I can do that math there. 6 minus 2 is 4, and 20 minus 16 is also 4. And then that anything over itself, the answer is always going to be 1. No matter what it is, if it was x over x, the answer is 1. Number 12, we again are evaluating. Got to be careful on this one because we have x, y squared minus x. And the y is the only thing in there that's being squared. So let's plug in our numbers. We have x is -4. Put your numbers in parentheses when you're doing it. For 1, I need it as a multiplication sign. But for 2, it's going to make my life easier as we work this out. The half is being raised to the second power. I'm subtracting the 4, again, put it in parentheses, and the reason being is I'm subtracting a negative, and I want to make sure I see that. Now, a lot of kids get freaked out when they see the half being raised to the second power. But remember, if it was 2 to the second power, it's just 2 times 2. And we already know that's 4. So it's the same thing. We have 1/2 to the second power means 1/2 times another 1/2. When I do that math, I get 1/4. Remember, 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. You multiply fractions straight across. So now I plug in for my 1/2 squared, I did this right here, I'm plugging in 1/4. So I have -4 times 1/4 minus, and actually I'm going to change this now because this becomes a +4. Because two negative signs or two signs or two like signs, a minus, a negative, or adding a positive, it becomes a plus sign. It becomes a positive. All right, so now I can multiply my -4. Again, I want to put this over 1 times 1/4. Well, all of this cancels out. The 4's cancel out, the 1's cancel out, and I'm left with 1. But remember, it was a negative times a positive, so this is a -1 plus 4. And then when I add that, I get 3 for my answer there. Next one, number 13. We have evaluate, and we have x to the 6th when x is -2. Again, put that -2 in parentheses. We're raising it to the 6th power. Here's a little tip for you. If your exponent is equal to an even number, then your answer is going to be positive. If your exponent is equal to an odd number, then your answer is going to be negative. Okay, so in this case, we have an even exponent. My answer is going to be a positive answer. So I'm doing 2 to the 6th power. If you want to write it all out, it's -2, and I need to do it 6 times. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you do this, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Excuse me, -2 times -2 is a +4. This also is a +4. And then when you multiply all these out, 4 times 4 times 4, we get 64 for our answer. And again, it was positive for that. Next one here, this is similar to the one we did with the degrees Celsius and all. We have a random, well, it's not really random, you probably have used it before, but it's a random formula that we haven't been talking about yet, and we're plugging in our numbers. So again, I have area, we don't know what the A is, but we do know 1/2 is going to stay 1/2. We know, and also all this is multiplying, 1/2 times B times H. B is 7, and H is 6. Now, just like we did a minute ago, think of what's easy. I can very easily say half of 6, and I get 3. So now the only thing I have left is 7 times 3. So my area then is 21, and it's going to be some kind of unit squared if we were doing that, but 21 is fine for right now. Okay, number 15, if x is equal to -2 and y is equal to 3, find the value of the expression. Again, we're plugging it in. I have a -8, the y was 3. And remember, 8y or -8y means -8 times the y. Then we have minus, we have x to the 4th. Now again, that -2 is going inside, that's being raised to the 4th power. So that -2 has to be inside parentheses. All right, exponents first, and we just did this a second ago. The negative to to an even exponent is going to give me a positive answer. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. Everything else, and I can do this at the same time too. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 3 times 8 is 24. And I'm minusing. Again, I have negative and more negatives, so my answer is going to be negative. This is going to be -40 for my answer on this one when I add it up or combine it up. Again, you can use that battle box idea if you need to, but you also have your Desmos, so don't forget to type it in and get your answer. All right, again, we're plugging and chugging. Find A Oh, no, excuse me. If A is equal to 1/3 and B is equal to 4, find the value of the expression. -3, parentheses, and actually I'm going to need to use brackets. 6, and then parentheses. A is 1/3, minus B is 4, and the 4 is being raised to the second power. All right, I'm going to do two things at once here. I'm going to do my 6 times 1/3, and again, simplify before you multiply. This is 6/1. 3 becomes 1, 6 becomes 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 1 is 1, so 2/1 is 2. Minus the 4 to the second power means 4 times 4, which is 16. All right, so I have that there. And now all I have to do is this part is still inside of the bracket, so I have -3 times -14. And again, I have a negative times a negative gives me a positive, and 3 times 14 is 42. All right, here, number 17. I already put out the numbers that we're comparing. We're supposed to be putting these in ascending order. Ascending means least to greatest. So that's the way I'm going with this. And I already listed them out just the way they were written. And now I'm going to put down all of the equivalencies. So 1%, and I need to keep this lined up when I do it. 0.010. The next one is 10. So this is 10 point. And then I'm just putting in zeros to hold my place value. Then I have 0.001 from my 1 times 10 to the -3. My 1/9 becomes 0.111, and the 1 is actually repeating. And then my 100% becomes 1.000. All right, now we have to put them in order from least to greatest. So I'm looking for the smallest number. Right now, I'm not going to look at this one here because that's has a whole number in front of the decimal, and this also has a whole number in front of the decimal. So I'm not looking at those two. I'm going to look at my 3 that have zeros for my whole numbers in front. So I've got 0, 0, 0. All right, now I'm going to look at just the decimal portion. This is 10, this is 1, and this is 111. So if I'm going least to greatest, 1 is smaller than 10, and 10 is smaller than 111. So I'm going to start with that one. That makes this part right here, this is my first number, and I'm going to put it from least to greatest like this, going in vertically. So my first number that I should be writing is 1 times 10 to the -3. And then this one is taken care of. My second one that I'm going to do now is the 10, which is actually the 1%. So now this is taken care of, so 1% is next. Now the next one it's going to be taken care of is the 1/9, or the 1/9. So that's going to be next in my list, 1/9. Now I'm looking at the ones that have actual whole numbers or numbers other than 0 in front of my decimal. 1 is smaller than 10, so that's going to go next, because again, least to greatest. That's this one right here, so 100% is going to go next. And then my last one that I'm writing is the number 10, and again, this is from least to greatest. So whether you write it out like this with commas in between it, that's fine, or if you write it out vertically from least to greatest, that's fine too. The next one, number 18, again, we're putting them in order from greatest, now this time greatest to least. We want to keep in mind that this is also, the word for this is descending. A lot of people need to, you need to remember what these words are. A lot of people forget. All right, so on this one, 8.27 times 10 to the third is going to become very big, so it's actually going to be 8,270. And I'm going to put some decimals here because the other things are decimal values. The 7/8 becomes 0.875. The 0.32 is 0.32, but I want one more 0 just to be the same as that place value as that 0.875. My 270 becomes 2.7, and again, I want a couple decimal places. And my square root of 84.64 becomes 9.2. And again, a couple of zeros here. All right. So now from here, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going in descending order, so I want the greatest number first. Well, clearly the greatest number was my exponent answer that we had. So I'm going to write them kind of in the middle here since I ran out of some room here. So my, my scientific notation. So we have 8.2 to 7 times 10 to the third. That's going to be the first one, so that's taken care of. The next biggest number is the 9. So then it's going to be the square root of 84.64. That one's next. And actually I'm going to have to erase this so I don't mess up with this as we go through. Okay, the next one we have is the 2, so 270% is next. That was this one. And then the next thing we have now, we're looking at the ones that have zeros. So the biggest number is 875. That's bigger than 320. So I'm looking at the 7 over 8, and then that's done. And then the last thing I have is 0.32. And that's my order. Again, from descending order, that's my largest number, greatest number on top, and my smallest number on the bottom. Okay, this one we are literally just writing it in scientific notation. Now, one of the things I tell my students is to make sure that we're talking about this is a very, very small number. So I know it's going to be times 10 to the negative something, because sorry about that, because very small numbers are going to be in the negative exponent. Then I have to think how many times, we'll also have to think about what the number is going to be. Well, I know my decimal has to go between the 3 and the 4. So it's going to be a 3.49 is what I'm looking at there. Now I have to know my exponent by how many times did I move that decimal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So there's my answer. I moved the decimal 5 places. I know it's a very small number, so it's a negative exponent, and I know I have to have one digit other than 0 in front of my decimal. So I have 3.49 times 10 to the negative 5th. Okay, on these here, I have to work out each one of them again before I can solve anything. So this is easy because it's already a decimal. Everything in the decimal first. The 12% becomes 0.12. Now, so far I want to check because we're labeling it as true or false. Is 0.10 less than 0.12? Yes. Okay, now is 3 over 25, when we do 3 over 25, when we do the division, remember 3 divided by 25, that is 0.12, and it says it's equal. Well, that's true too. And now we have 20%. We're saying that the 0.12 is less than 0.2, and that is true as well, because that would be a 20 right there if we want to do it that way to look at compare the decimals a little bit better. 12 is less than 20. So this one is true. The next one here, I can actually stop after this very first thing because I have 0.02. We're saying it's less than 0.02 because when I move the decimal 2 places, I get 0.02. This is not true. This should be an equal sign between it. I can stop right there because that's false. The next one is the same kind of thing. I have 0.08. That part's easy. We already have a decimal. And then is less than 0.08 because, again, 2 places, 1, 2. And again, that should have an equal sign. So again, false. This next one here, we have 0.375. And again, if I move it 2 places, that's 0.375. And yes, it's equal, so far so good. When I divide 3 divided by 8, I also get 0.375, so far so good. Now we want to know, is this, the 3.375, is it less than the 0.48? So 0.48, but again, a 0. That is, 375 is less than 480, so this one is true. All right, number 21, we're using the less than, greater than, or equal to compare the following. Keep in mind a couple of things. First of all, that very first one is a negative number, and so I want to make sure I use a number line to make sure I don't get that wrong. But also, use your number line, ladies and gentlemen, to help you remember what the signs are, because a lot of people forget what the signs are. If I have a number line, my signs are on the end of it. There's a 0. Everything this way is positive. Everything this way is negative. This sign right here on the right-hand side, that sign right there is showing me my numbers are getting bigger. That means this is greater than. If I'm looking at this side here, my numbers are getting smaller. That's my less than sign. So that sign right there is what we're doing. All right, again, to compare these, this is already a decimal. Negative 6.78. When I do the math here, I get negative 6.75. All I need to look at is a 78 and a 75. But again, they're both negative. So this can trip people up a lot of times. I'm going to actually put it on a number line, and I'm only putting a 0 here, and I'm putting 2 numbers here. Which number would be closer to 0, the 75 or the 78? Well, the 75 would go here, and then the 78 would be further away over here. That means that the 78 is less than the 75. So that's the symbol that would go there, because the 7, I would put just like that right there, even if I was doing the signs. Here I have 0.08, and this becomes 0.08 again, because I have 2 places to the left to make it a small number because it was a negative exponent. These are equal to each other, clearly. The next one, if I do the division, I get 0.777 repeating. This one, I get, if I move the decimal over, I get 0.770 to hold the place value. 777 is bigger than 770, so that's going this way for that one. Last one. Brandon has answered 48 out of 60 questions correctly on his test. A lot of people don't even know how to set this up. If we're saying he got 48 out of 60 and we were writing on a paper, we would literally write this, 48 out of 60. Boom, done. Except for the fact that we have to, we're not asking for it as a fraction, we're asking for it as a percent. So if we think of our chart that we did, we have fractions, we have decimals would be next, and then we have percents, which would be next over here. So to change this into a decimal, all I'm going to do is divide. 48 divided by 60. When I do that math, I get 0.8 using your Desmos. That's what you're going to make sure you do. Use your calculator. Then to change it from a decimal to a percent, I'm moving the decimal 2 places to the right. That gives me 80%. And that is my answer there. So again, this is all of your questions for your test review. Please make sure you are studying, and good luck on your test.